Hi, my name is Rachel Paxton. Today I'm going to show you how to make homemade dandelion jelly. In this class you will learn how to make and can dandelion jelly. I'll lead you through the process step by step. I'll give you the recipe and canning supply list that you can download and print out for future reference. You can find those in your course materials and print those out. Those are PDF files. You will gain the confidence you need to try more canning recipes on your own. For this recipe, you're going to need 2 cups of fresh dandelion flowers, 4 cups of sugar, 1 box or 6 tablespoons of powdered pectin, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 1/4 teaspoon of butter. You'll also need a boiling water canner or a large stock pot, a canning rack if you're using your own stock pot, a jar lifter or tongs, wide mouth funnel, and 2 to 3 pint-sized canning jars. This is what a boiling water canner looks like. You can pick these up pretty inexpensively at Walmart or online at Amazon. There's a link to this in your supply list in your course materials. If you don't have a boiling water canner and you don't want to purchase one, you can use a large stock pot to can in. You just need to make sure that there's enough room in the pot for you to have an inch of water above your jar when it's in the pan. This is what the canning rack looks like. They come with the boiling water canner. But if you're using a large stock pot, you need something like this in the bottom of your pot. You don't want your jars to sit right on the bottom of the pan or they can break while they are boiling. You also need a jar lifter or tongs. These are special jar lifters that help you get your jars easily in and out of the pot. These are only a couple dollars. These wide mouth funnels are really nice too for letting you get your food in your jar without spilling. They have a wide mouth in them so that they fit in your jars nicely. First you want to fill your canner about 3/4 of the way filled with water and heat until boiling. Actually for this recipe you're not going to do that right away because you need to prepare your dandelions a day ahead of time. So let's skip this for a few minutes and we'll come back to it. So you don't need to do this quite yet. Or sterilizing the jars. Okay, first you want to rinse your dandelion flowers. You want to pick your dandelions on a sunny day. If you I don't know if you've ever noticed or not, but dandelions close up when it's dark outside or when the sun's not shining. So you want it to be nice and sunny. And outside when you harvest your dandelions, make sure that you pick dandelions that have not been sprayed or treated with any chemicals or pesticides or they won't be safe to eat. So make sure that they're either wild or in an area where you know that they have not been sprayed. You want to rinse them off to get any dirt or little tiny bugs off of them that you can't see. Next you want to remove your dandelion stems. The easiest way is to use a pair of kitchen scissors to snip off the ends. You don't have to cut them off, but your jelly will be sweeter tasting if you get as much of the green part off as possible. It makes your jelly a little bit more bitter. Next you want to place the dandelion flowers in a bowl or a saucepan and cover with 4 cups of boiling water. And then you place this in the after it cools off, you place it in the refrigerator for at least 24 hours. So what you're basically doing is making dandelion tea. If you're going to make tea to drink, this is how you would make it. You would put your dandelions in the water and then strain the dandelions out when you're ready to drink it. So you're basically making a tea that you're going to turn into jelly. So after the 24 hours are up, and if you don't get back to it in 24 hours, don't worry about it. It took me 2 days to get back to mine, and it was just fine. So a couple of days is fine, but just keep in mind that the longer you let it sit, the stronger it will get. But I would say up to 2 days is fine. You want to strain your dandelions through a fine mesh strainer to achieve a clear liquid. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You just need to make sure that the openings and whatever you're using to strain it are small enough that it doesn't let any of the fine little pieces through. A regular colander is too big to accomplish this, but this is a fine mesh strainer. You can find these at Walmart. They're probably about $5 or $6, and there should be a link to this in your supply list in your course materials also. If you can't get one of these, you can also use cheesecloth. You would pour your dandelion mixture through the cheesecloth and just the liquid would go through. And another option is to use a jelly bag. If you're going to make a lot of jelly, you might want to invest in something like this. I think they're only about $8 on Amazon and they're really neat. You just pour the mixture into the jelly bag and then the liquid strains through. So any one of those three ways will work well. And you should end up with a clear liquid that you want to place in your stock pot. You need 4 cups for this recipe. As you can see, this is about 3½ cups. So if you don't have 4 cups, you need to add water. If you have more than 4 cups, you want to pour out a little bit. This is just like a tea, so adding water to it is not going to make any difference. But the important thing is to have exactly 4 cups of liquid, because if you have too much or too little liquid, your jelly won't set. So make sure you have exactly 4 cups of liquid. Next, you want to measure your pectin and lemon juice and add it to the liquid that you just put in the pan. I use a classic ball pectin for this recipe. There's different kinds of pectins you can use, but you just want to use a classic dry pectin for this recipe. If you buy it in the box, in the small box, then you would put 1 box in for this recipe, but I like to buy mine in bigger quantities. It's more inexpensive to use the jars of pectin. So if you're using a bigger jar like this, then you would want to measure 6 tablespoons. And if you wonder if you can use fresh lemon juice or not, it's suggested to use bottled lemon juice because the reason you're putting lemon juice in this recipe is to add acid to the recipe to make it safe for boiling water canning. And if you use fresh lemons, the fresh lemons can have different acid levels, and the bottled lemon juice has a more predictable measured acid level, and so in canning recipes they always suggest that you use bottled lemon juice instead of fresh lemons, because there's no way to know for sure exactly what your acid level is, and the recipes have been created using bottled lemon juice, so they know what the acid levels are in those. So to make sure your recipe is safe for canning, it's best to use the bottled lemon juice. So you want to stir the pectin and lemon juice into your dandelion tea that you've made and bring it to a boil. You want to bring it to a boil that cannot be stirred down. That means that when you stir it, it doesn't stop boiling, it keeps boiling. So after it starts boiling, you can add, at this point, you can add a tiny pinch of butter. I said 1/4 teaspoon in the recipe, but you can just use a tiny pinch. It doesn't have to be an exact amount, and that will help reduce the foaming that you'll have while cooking. There'll probably be a little bit still, but it helps reduce it. But the butter is optional. You don't have to add it. After it's boiling, you want to pour in the sugar all at one time. It's best to have your sugar measured out. You don't want to measure it into your recipe as you are pouring it in, because it's easy to lose track of how many cups you've put in if you get interrupted during your recipe. So you want to have it all measured ahead of time so you don't make a mistake. Then pour it in all at one time and stir it, and it'll take a few minutes for it to start boiling again. The sugar has to dissolve, but after it starts boiling again and it can't be stirred down, set your timer for 1 minute. After it cooks for 1 minute, turn the heat off, and you might notice a little bit of foam on the top. The foam doesn't hurt anything. If you end up getting some foam in your jars, it doesn't hurt anything. It just doesn't look very pretty. So do the best you can to skim the foam off the top with a metal spoon. It's usually pretty easy to get off. Next, take a ladle and ladle your jelly into your sterilized jars. While you were cooking the dandelion mixture and putting the sugar and stuff in, that is when you want to have your big pan of water on the stove and get it starting to boil. Your jars can sit for a minute if it's not boiling quite yet, so it doesn't have to be at a certain time. So now is when you want to be getting your water to a boil, and you also want to make sure your jars are sterilized. I usually sterilize mine by running them through the dishwasher just on a quick cycle. Your jars need to be hot when you put your liquid in the jars. Jars can be sensitive to changes in heat and cold, And so you always want to put hot liquid into hot jars and put the hot jars into hot water when to boil them so that the temperature change doesn't crack them. So I usually put my jars in the dishwasher while I'm preparing the recipe, and then they're ready when I'm ready to put my stuff in the jars. So you want to sterilize your rings and your lids and your jars. You can reuse your rings and your jars, but not your lids. You need to buy new lids every time. They're very inexpensive. Always make sure you have extra lids on hand because you don't want to run out in the middle of a recipe. So make sure you have lots of lids. And so when your jars are sterilized, you can start pouring your hot liquid into the jars. You want to leave a 1/4 inch headspace. The headspace is the amount of space between the top of the jelly and the top of the jar. It's really important when you're canning to have the correct amount of headspace, because when you are processing the jars in the boiling water canner, your food will expand when it's heated, and different kinds of food expand at different amounts, and so that is why different recipes will call for a different amount of headspace. And you need to have enough headspace so that when your food expands, that it doesn't go all the way to the top of the jar, because that can in rare cases make your jars break, but in the very least it will keep your jars from sealing, and you don't want that to happen. So make sure you leave the correct amount of headspace. And you also don't want to leave jars half full. Like if you only have enough liquid or whatever you're putting in your jars and you have more than the amount of headspace, like say your jar is only half full or 3/4 full, you don't want to can that, because that leaves too much air and too much space in your jar for germs and bacteria to grow, and it's not safe to can. So if your jar is not quite full and you have too much headspace, you just want to put that, you can still eat it, you just want to put that in the refrigerator and not can it. So after you get all the jelly in the jars, you want to wipe the rims of the jars with a damp paper towel to make sure there's no food on top of the jars to ruin your seal. And you want to place your rings and lids on the jars just finger tight. They don't need to be super tight. You want to put them in the boiling water canner. Your water doesn't have to be boiling when you put the water in. It at least needs to be warm to hot so that there's not a big temperature change in the water when you put the jars in. But you can finish bringing the water to a boil after you put the jars in, or it can already be boiling, either one. So put your jars in and adjust the water level if necessary. You need to have 1 inch of water above your jars. And after your water is boiling, you want to boil your jars for 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes are up, use a jar lifter or tongs to remove the jars from the canner and set them on a towel on the kitchen counter to cool. Let your jars sit on the counter till they're cool. Your jars may have sealed in the canner, but they haven't. If they haven't, they will seal while they're sitting on the counter and cooling. You should hear a pinging noise when your jars seal. And the way you know if it's sealed or not is by pressing your finger down in the center of the lid. And if it goes down and up again, then it is not sealed. It should be flat. It shouldn't move. And if it is sealed, you can store it in a dark, cool area for at least 2 years. And if it's not sealed, you can still eat it. You just need to put it in the refrigerator and eat it pretty soon. So this dandelion jelly is really fun to make. This is the first time that I have made this. It's been something I've been wanting to try because we have lots of dandelions in our yard, way too many, and I was curious to try dandelion jelly and dandelion tea. People say that dandelion jelly tastes like honey, and it actually does. This tastes a lot like honey. It's really good, and it's very inexpensive because if you already have the pectin on hand, you may not even have to buy anything to make this. It's a fun treat to give away to people during the holidays or for birthday presents, and so I like to give people jellies. Oh, and one more thing about letting it sit. You do want to let it sit for a day or two before you move them. Jelly can be a little finicky sometimes and can take a little while for the jelly to set. So don't move the jars around for at least a day. If you shake the jar too much, your jelly might not set. So let it set for a little bit. And you should have good luck with the ball pectin. I haven't had any problems with getting my jelly to set with that. So give it a try, see what you think. This recipe makes about 3 pints of jelly, so that would be 6 half pints. It might be a little bit less than that, but it should be close. So anyway, give it a try and see what you think. This is fun to make. I have never been a big jelly maker in the past because my family likes to eat jam with the big chunks of fruit in it, but jelly is fun to make, and I will definitely be making this dandelion jelly again. So give it a try and see what you think.